Hello, hello. So, in today's episode, we are going to talk about whether or not therapists should share their political opinions on Instagram. And I think that this is a really good question. I certainly got a lot of DMs about that in October, November, December, right around the time of the election. But obviously, there's still a lot going on politically in the US. I think that there's going to continue to be a lot going on politically in the US for quite some time. And so, this is something that I think comes up for a lot of therapists. A lot of us sort of view ourselves as activists or people who care deeply about our community. And also on the flip side, we were also taught to hide ourselves, to not share our opinion, to be really agreeable, to let the clients take the lead. And so it can sort of feel like this push pull of, I need to say something. And also, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say something or how to say something. So that's something that I wanted to talk about in today's episode because I think that there is a lot of nuance here. So, if you decide that you are somebody who wants to share your political opinion on Instagram, I do want to forewarn you that there will likely be some backlash. And that is really important just to acknowledge, right? I think our political climate in the past, like 8 years, has been more divisive than ever, especially in the United States. And so, people have very strong opinions one way or the other. And people take to the internet to share those opinions, to argue with others, to spread hate speech, to put other people down. And so I do think that that is like a very important reality that you just acknowledge for yourself. If you choose to share political content, you will probably get some hate, you will probably get some pushback. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you are prepared to handle that. Another drawback that can certainly come up is alienating existing or potential clients, right? So, if you are somebody who does not know the political affiliations of everyone on your caseload, this may be challenging for you, right? You may want to be thoughtful with how you frame things, that you are not too judgmental towards people with opposing views than you, and that you are not going to ostracize or alienate any of your existing clients. I shared pretty openly, I would say, around my political beliefs in October, November, December of this year. In case you have not seen any of those posts, I am a Democrat, and even more particular, I am very anti-Trump, right? And I felt okay taking such a strong stance because I knew for a fact that all of my clients also felt the same way. I had had conversations with all of my clients of their own bringing up about political anxiety, about election uncertainty, about different policies that scared them. It was very, very top of mind for the clients that I work with. And I think the reason why I was lucky enough to have a caseload that was very homogeneous in this way is that I've always shared pretty openly about my politics online, and most of my clients have found me through Instagram, right? So, I went back through my old Instagram content. I started my Instagram in October 2020. So, right before the election previous to this one. And I didn't have any in-feed posts. I did have a few TikToks that I made about politics at the time, but I shared very regularly in stories about politics. I made a whole guide on election anxiety that was very much clear around if you're afraid about what Trump's going to do, if you're afraid of your rights being taken away, etc. So I've always really stated where I stand quite clearly. I went to a lot of protests in 2020. I was sharing that on stories. It's part of who I am as a person. And so I don't think that any of my clients were surprised to find that out. I think they probably actually sought me out because they knew that we aligned politically. And so it's something that's been, part of our work off and on as, different things have come up just in sort of the larger grand scheme of what's happening in our country. So that's to say, if that's not the case for you, if you know that you have a lot of diversity in terms of political opinions and beliefs on your caseload, you may or may not feel as comfortable sharing politically. And that is okay, right? Part of what I guess a decision you need to make is part of how you want to niche down. By working with people with similar values to you. Is that important to you? And if it is, then I would definitely suggest, talking about politics online, including affirming language on your website, that kind of thing. I feel like it doesn't really bother me. I'm not like super into politics. I know that I feel this way, but I'm happy to work with clients of like both political beliefs. That's okay. You don't have to talk about it online. Or maybe you talk about it and you share, but you're not as strong with your opinion. You're not as like firm that this is like the right way to do it, or this is totally wrong that, we're doing XYZ thing to people. So just something to kind of like consider there in terms of your preferences. Now, as a therapist, you are also a human being. So you are allowed to share your political opinions, whether clients like it or not. Your social media platform is different than a therapy session with clients, right? This is your time. This is your space. This is your home. This is your platform. And so you are allowed to share these things. But of course, sharing those things may also have an impact on the relationship that you have with your clients in the therapy room. So just something to consider there. The other thing I kind of wanted to touch on is the code of ethics. So, if you've followed me on Business of Therapy for some time now, you've probably noticed that when I share my monthly income report reels, or occasionally when I have other reels go viral where I talk about therapists earning six figures or charging $250 plus per session, a lot of therapists have a lot of negative feelings about what it means to be private pay. And the word unethical gets thrown around quite a bit, which is quite surprising to me. But a lot of therapists seem to push back and believe that it is unethical for therapists to charge a premium, that it sort of goes against our values as a profession, our responsibility to be helpers. And I've read through the code of ethics. I just don't find that to be true anywhere. But something I do see in the code of ethics, and the social workers code of ethics in particular, is around social justice, right? So I'm going to read a little excerpt. The value listed here is social justice, and the ethical principle is as follows. Social workers challenge social injustice. Social workers pursue social change, particularly with and on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed individuals and groups of people. Social workers' social change efforts are focused primarily on issues of poverty, unemployment, discrimination, and other forms of social injustice. These activities seek to promote sensitivity to and knowledge about oppression and cultural and ethnic diversity. Social workers strive to ensure access to needed information, services, and resources, equality of opportunity, and meaningful participation in decision making for all people. So, when we take that into account, I think that we definitely have full permission, if not even a responsibility, to like fight for social justice as social workers or as therapists. And so I do just want to say, like, if you are somebody who is outraged by what is happening, please do not feel like you have to make yourself small because you are a therapist. Therapy is very political. These issues greatly impact a lot of our clients. I'm sure, a lot of your folks are really talking about anxiety and what's going to happen and what does this mean for them. And so if you are somebody who is fired up about that, if you are somebody who wants to do something about that, please feel free to use your platform to advocate for change, to give a voice to people that need it. Because at the end of the day, your values are already woven into your work, whether you post about them or not, or you're outspoken about them or not, right? And so being human and sharing your political beliefs can really help you to attract like-minded people, whether that's like-minded clients, whether it is referral relationships, whether it's just people in your community. And it can feel really, really good to be surrounded by people who share the same values and belief systems that you do. Now, when you are sharing about politics online, I do think it is very important to brace yourself. So, like a personal rule that I have is not to share about politics when I am not doing well, right? So, if I am like feeling a little depressed lately or a little anxious, or I have something really major going on in my personal life, or if I'm PMSing really badly, I'm not going to share about politics. I also have a rule. I don't share income specifics during those times either, because I know that the haters and the trolls are going to come, and it can be really dysregulating for your nervous system to get those sorts of comments, right? Especially if there's any piece of you that is like, am I doing something wrong here? Or am I taking too big of a risk here? Or am I not allowed to be sharing here? So I would sort of prepare yourself, make sure that you are in a good state, because you likely will get a lot of pushback. So just be prepared. On the plus side of that, though, you do get lots of engagement, and even the haters are contributing to your engagement. I will say some of my top performing posts this past year have been political in nature, especially sort of talking about like the overlap between politics and anxiety, or politics and therapy, those have done really, really well. It's also totally okay. You can set boundaries for discourse. So, I don't think that it's helpful to like delete any opposing comments, but if people are being like rude, if people are saying hateful things, please go ahead and delete that. But, I'll get comments or DMs of people just being like, MAGA, like, guess who won, like, whatever. And I'm just like, I don't answer them, but I leave it there. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree. Now, I do really think that it is important to be sharing political content from a place of like authenticity and transparency, right? So if you're somebody who does not feel strongly about these things, please don't just go ahead and post about it because you feel like you have to or you feel like you should. But if you're somebody who shares, the same personal values or beliefs, if you have strong political views, if you want your followers or your clients to align with these values, it can be a really, really powerful way to build a strong sense of community by showing people who you are on a more personal level and building trust and rapport that you care about the same things, deep down who you are as a person. So I wanted to share, I'm going to just go ahead and like briefly summarize. I counted in the past 6 months, I've done 8 political posts in feed. I've shared some more in stories as well. But so it's not like a ton, right? It's maybe an average of once a month. And there were certainly, some weeks where I posted many leading up to the election and some where I wasn't really posting anything at all. But they all have done super, super well. So the first one that I posted a few days before the election read POV therapists hyping themselves up for an entire week of sessions about election anxiety while simultaneously feeling utterly terrified of another Trump presidency. In my caption, I said, if we go back in time to the 1700s, I'm going to lose it. And that one, some people were a little bit angry about in the comments about what I meant by going backwards in time, but that felt pretty self-explanatory to me. So nothing too spicy here in terms of like the content itself, but really speaking to that therapist experience, the election anxiety experience, and stating where I stood on the election, right? It wasn't, being anxious that Trump was going to lose. It was being anxious that he was going to win. And that content did really, really well. The next thing that I shared was in response to a lot of backlash that I got on that first reel. And this was a talking head video. And I said, imagine being so emotionally inept that you cannot conceive that one person can publicly share their own personal political opinion while at the same time being perfectly competent at treating other people with a different political opinion with kindness, empathy, curiosity, and respect. And then I went on to, kind of talk about it some more. And this was in response to a lot of people being like, it's so inappropriate for therapists to, share their political opinion. Now, my clients, as I said, are all Democrats. But I have plenty of therapists inside of my coaching programs. I live in the state of Florida, so I have plenty of friends and even family members who are pro-Trump. And that is okay, right? I'm still able to interact with those people. I'm still able to have a basic human level of respect for them. I'm able to treat you with like kindness, empathy, all of the things. And so, I was kind of like talking about that nuance there that I think a lot of people forget because, again, we live in such a divisive world where everyone's opinions are so, so, so strong. And we're like getting to this point of like the two groups are almost not able to interact, right? Which I think is horrible. But anyways, beside the point. So that was a second post that I did, kind of trying to add some more nuance there. A third post I did was on the day after election day. So I said, if you woke up sad, angry, and scared today, I want you to know, ... Those feelings make total sense. Do not make yourself wrong for being anxious today. And then I shared like a screenshot from my notes app of things that people can do to feel better. So again, kind of bringing in that niche of mine of anxiety with my own personal views about politics, right? And so it doesn't feel like totally out of left field. Maybe if you're a therapist for moms, you want to talk about reproductive rights or voting rights for women with the SAVE Act or, any number of things. But I think it's about finding that connection piece between like, how does this relate to your people, right? Like, what are your folks bringing up in session? How does this relate? So it really speaks to people. And it's not just like, it's your job now to report the news or something, because it's not, right? You're a therapist on Instagram. I did another reel that said POV, you just got your period. Trump was elected president and it gets dark out at 5 p.m. because if you will recall, we had daylight savings times at the same time as this election, which was a disaster. And I had decided at the time I was matching $1,000 of donations to ACLU of Florida. And so I shared about that in the caption. Another post I did in January, remember that Trump didn't save your favorite doom scrolling app. He was the one who started the ban. Feeling anxious when our rights are on the line is a totally normal response. Therapists are allowed to voice political opinions, right? So again, really speaking to who is my audience here, right? It's people who feel anxious and it's therapists. So I'm speaking to that. This is right after the TikTok ban. I'm also like a big girl on social media, but it's not totally out of left field. I'm not feeling like I have to report on everything that he does, but I'm able to say like, okay, what really resonates with my people here and where can I authentically share around that? I did another reel trying to remind myself that as a therapist, I can't fix the state of our country right now. Just sitting in the rage with my clients is doing enough, right? So again, really speaking to that experience. Another one, I hate to say it, but with everything going on in our country right now, there has never been more job security for therapists. People need us more than ever. And I put like a little blue heart to sort of show where I stand there. And then lastly, was about Trump and RFK Jr.'s questioning, I guess, of the efficacy of SSRI and investigating antidepressants. So I did like a talking head reel with like a news article behind me and sort of went through and explained that for folks because again, that's super relatable to my niche of anxious millennial woman. SSRIs are super important, right? So I really explained that news to folks. I hope that those examples were helpful so that way you could really see sort of, how a therapist who cares a lot about politics can share on Instagram without making it your entire personal brand, without making it your entire identity, or without feeling like it's your like personal responsibility to speak up on every single political issue happening. There's a lot of political issues I've not spoken publicly on. I've actually gotten quite a bit of DMs being like, are you going to speak about your thoughts on this or that or this or that? And I've chosen to stay out of those. So, for instance, I have a lot of clients and friends who are Jewish, and I also have several clients and friends who are Palestinian. And so, I have not found a need to speak publicly on that matter. I feel like that would actually cause like a lot of damage in my relationships on my caseload for me to speak strongly one way or the other. And I'm able to hold space for both groups. Of course, do I have a personal opinion? Yes. Do I feel like it is my responsibility to share that online? No. And for me, it doesn't make sense right now as a therapist who is practicing, who is seeing clients in both groups, for me to go ahead and do that. Right. And so you don't have to speak out on every single issue under the sun. But if there are things that are important to you, if there are things that feel really relevant to the clients that you work with, and if there are things, most importantly, that you're feeling called to speak out on, please know that you have full permission to do that. Right. If I was somebody who felt super, super strongly one way or the other, I might risk doing that. I might risk saying, okay, I might lose a client or two on my caseload and maybe they can find another provider, but this is something that I do not want to be silenced on. I'm okay for this particular issue of staying out of it in my public sphere, and that is okay, right? And so I think just kind of being able to have that nuance for yourself is really, really important. This is a little bit of an unrelated side note, but recently, a therapist in Private Practice Academy sent me a very lovely testimonial, but she asked if I could include more training on sort of how to market to a particular subset of her caseload, which is folks that are more like psycho-spiritual and interested in holistic work. And I think that that was such a good question. And stick with me on this, but I think it sort of relates to the politics piece, and that it's about bringing in who you are, both inside and outside of session, but who you are as a human into your content, right? And so, I'm not very psycho-spiritual, so I hope my examples here make sense. But like, if you're somebody who does tarot cards every morning, share that on your Instagram. Maybe you do like a weekly tarot poll or something. If you're somebody who's really into crystals, if you're somebody who's into like the cacao, share some of that stuff. And, you could share it in B-roll. You could share it in your examples and content. You could share it in stories. You can share a playlist you're listening to. You can share a meditation you did. You can share, a TV show that you like that has to do with those themes. But being willing to share different pieces of yourself really allows you to attract people with similar values and similar beliefs, right? And so to me, the way to market more to those people is not to put like all over the place, like psychospiritual therapist, right? But instead to allow people to see who you are. And that is how you attract other people who are similar to you, right? I'm sure that you guys have seen this, that a lot of people like adopt dogs that look like them. A lot of people's partners look like them, right? Like we want to work with people. We want to be surrounded by people who we feel are similar to us, whether that be, in appearance, in age, in, like culturally, in values, in interests. And so being able to share these other pieces of yourself is super, super, super important. All right, that is all for today's episode. To recap, there is no one size fits all answer here. As a therapist, you do not need to talk about politics, and alignment matters. If you want to share your political beliefs, if that is something that is important to you, if that feels authentic, please go ahead and do it. You have a right to, even if it makes some people angry. So think about what feels good to you. Think about what views feel like you are okay incorporating them as part of your brand. You're okay with everyone on your caseload knowing. You are okay with standing firmly behind it, even if it has some short-term negative consequences. There is so much good that we can do in this world when we prioritize the power of our own voices for ourselves, our family, our friends, and our communities. So if you are feeling called to be an advocate in any way, shape, or form, I would absolutely welcome you into that realm of things on Instagram. And in the meantime, I will be here sharing my political content for those of you who do not feel comfortable. You can always share my political stuff in stories as like a light way to show your audience, how you feel about things too. All right, I will see you all next week. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.